thank you, Mr. Davis, for the Kohlberg reasoning. We'll spend some time on that in class so we make sure you understand it. The one thing I do want to emphasize, and Mr. Davis touched on it, is that we're not saying that everybody should get to stage 6. Kohlberg never said that. In fact, Mr. Davis said that a lot of people never got to stage 6, so he was considering getting rid of it. We're just going from the self to principle. So the lowest rung, stage 1, is really about me. And then the further we move away from stage 1 to stage 6, the less we are concerned about me, and the more we're concerned about abstract principles such as justice and equality and things like that. Okay, I'm going to spend most of this period on just this slide, most of this video. Erik Erikson's psychosocial stages. So these, again, they're social. Interesting piece of trivia, Erik Erikson's middle name was Erik. Just kidding. So Erik Erikson's social stages, he said that we go through these stages very predictably, and these are brought about by our environment. So the first one is trust versus mistrust. Now, this is where it's really important to write down examples in your notes. Here's what I think about when I think trust versus mistrust. A baby will cry, because you notice it's 0 to 1.5 years. A baby will cry. Will you go pick up the baby? Will you feed the baby? Will you change the baby? The baby is learning right now, is the world a trustworthy place or not? Can I trust the world? And if you feed your baby, if you hold your baby, if you change your baby, all that other stuff, they will learn that the world can be trusted. Now, here's the most important part of this. Erikson and a whole bunch of psychologists would say, if you don't resolve this stage, it's going to be almost impossible for you to move to any other stage. So if you don't trust the world, if you learn to mistrust the world, all these other stages I'm going to talk about, might as well just throw them out the window, because they're not going to do you much good. Okay, so let's say you learn that the world is trustworthy. You have a good parent or caretaker who takes care of you, and you say, I can trust the world. Now we're going to look at autonomy versus self-doubt. Autonomy is independence. It's another word for independence. You might want to write that down too. I don't know if you know what they call people who are 2 years old, or the age of being 2 years old. They call it the terrible twos, because the terrible twos, a kid develops one word that they love to say a lot, and that word is no. And they also say, I do it myself. No, I do it myself. So they are trying to learn, am I independent, or can I not do things myself? Do I doubt myself? So what you want to do with a kid that age is you want to make them feel independent. You want to let them do things themselves. You want to give them choices. My stepmom was great at that. She'd say, do you want to put on your shoes now, or do you want to put them on in 5 minutes? And you're still telling the kid to put their shoes on, but you're letting them feel like they have a choice. So let's say a kid at this stage says, I feel independent, I feel autonomous, the world is trustworthy, I have autonomy, so I can move on to initiative versus guilt. And then another word that you see in this sometimes is shame, for the opposite. Initiative means, can I initiate something? Can I start something? I just read a really interesting article recently about how we're raising kids who aren't helpful. And that's because whenever a kid goes to try to help us, we tell them they can't help us because they'll do it wrong. What we need to allow a kid to do is start something on their own. And here's an example from my life. My youngest child loved to make what she called experiments in the kitchen. And she would cook things, and they were awful. They were just awful. Now, if I were a bad parent, or if I wanted to get my kid to feel shame and guilt, I would say, you always make a mess. You can't cook, blah, blah, blah. And then she'd feel like, I can't start anything. Can't, I'm not going to initiate anything in this world. But we let her do it, and she made one of the worst things I've ever had in my life. We were having some people over, and she said, would you like some pelusimum? She brought out a bowl. Would you like some pelusimum? And we said, sure, what is it? And it was mashed bananas and American cheese. It's about how you'd think it would taste. And so we took a bite and we said, that's delicious. It wasn't, but we made her feel like she can do things. She can start things. So it's not just that she's independent, but if I have an idea, I can follow through on it. So let's say you have people who allow you to start things, to say, I'm going to build a fort, I'm going to do all these things. So you've resolved initiative. So you feel the world is trustworthy, you feel independent, you feel like you can start things. Then you move into, this is elementary school years. So really think elementary school years. By the way, keep writing those examples. If you want to write pelusimum for this one, do it if that helps. And how do you spell pelusimum? I have no idea. So confidence versus inferiority. Are you going to feel confident when you get out, when you get to puberty, or are you going to feel inferior? Um, I mean, that's kind of elementary school in a nutshell. Here's my example that I think of for elementary school: reading groups. And you all probably had reading groups when you were in elementary school. Well, are you in the high reading group or are you in the low reading group? And some teachers try to hide it and say, you're in the Bluebird reading group and you're in the Robin reading group. But everybody knew which one was the high one. So are you going to leave feeling like I'm pretty good at stuff? Or I'm not good at stuff, right? So really one of the things that we need to do in the elementary school is find things that people can feel confident about. It doesn't necessarily have to be school. I mean, as long as you feel okay about school, you can feel confident about sports or music or anything else like that. So our goal with a child in this stage is to make them feel confident about what they can do. Otherwise, they're going to have an inferiority complex the rest of their life. Okay, so I'm sorry I keep repeating this, but it helps. So the child feels the world is trustworthy, that they are independent, that they can start things, that they can do things, that they have self-efficacy. Okay, here's where you are. Ready? Identity versus role confusion. Now, again, these pairs are, this is what happens if you resolve this, if you succeed at this stage. This is what happens when you don't. Now, think about when you were in middle school. I'm not even going to pick on you right now. Think about when you were in middle school. Did you try on some new personas? Did you say, I don't know who I am? Am I going to be a rocker? Am I going to be a preppy? Am I going to be all these different things? Did you try different hairdos? Did you try different styles? Most of you probably did. You're trying to figure out who you are. And some of you are probably still kind of in that process, and you should be. I mean, you're not going to be this way for the rest of your life. You're going to change, but you're going to, at some point during this time of adolescence, say, I know who I am. I know I know what I'm good at. I know I can start things. I'm independent. I can trust. If you don't have these things, you can't have identity. So let's say you're finding out who you are as an adolescent, and you kind of know who you are. I mean, I'm not saying you got it locked and loaded and you can write a mission statement, but you say, I know who I am. So I have resolved identity. And then you get into early adulthood, which is intimacy versus isolation. Are you going to find someone and people who you can be intimate with, or are you going to feel isolated? Really, this one is, and I'd write this in your notes, it's marriage. That's the big one. Who are you going to spend the rest of your life with? Who are you going to share all of your thoughts and feelings with? Who are your good friends that you can hold close? Because high school, you have a lot of acquaintances, but when you're in early adulthood, you find out who your real friends are. So that's where you say, am I going to find the person and people that I'm going to spend the rest of my life with? Significant other, friends, things like that. So let's say you've resolved that. Let's say you have that social connection. You feel intimate with one person very closely, and multiple people also closely as friends, but not as close as a spouse. Okay, now here's where I am, middle adulthood, and I'm going to skip up here so you can see it. Generativity versus stagnation. Look at the root of this word. It's to generate things. Can I generate positivity? Can I generate things that the world needs, or do I stagnate? Am I like a stagnant pool that doesn't do anything? That's kind of where the midlife crisis comes in. If let's say you have a job where basically you feel like all you're doing is moving a piece of paper from this part of the desk to this part of the desk, or making millionaires billionaires. You're like, am I doing any good for the world? In the middle part of your life, you start thinking, what's my value? What's my legacy? What am I leaving here? And this is by far the biggest part of this, that time-wise. Because, let's say you get married and you have your friends. By the time you hit 30, you're really entering the middle adulthood stage here. And you're going to be there probably till you retire, right? Till your 60s. So, I mean, I'm lucky because my job, I feel like I'm doing some good. Not always, and I'm not saving the world, but at least I don't feel like I'm subtracting from the happiness of the world or the benefit of the world. But some people, there's a teacher in this building who was a lawyer, and in the middle of his life said, I don't feel like I'm doing any good, and he became a teacher, and he loves it. So this is where I am. This is where Mr. Davis is, where we're thinking, are we generating positivity in the world, good in the world, something that the world needs, or are we just being stagnant? Okay. So if we resolve that, if we don't feel like we've had a midlife crisis, so let's say we get to retirement, we feel like, you know what, I did some good in this community, in my family, maybe in the world. Great. Then you get to the end, and this is the thing that just terrifies me. So late adulthood, this is basically from retirement to death. Do I have ego integrity? And I'm going to talk about this world integrity. this word integrity. It's the same root as integer. And if you remember your math, an integer is a whole number, W-H-O-L-E. Does your ego, does yourself feel whole like an integer? Does it have integrity? So integrity means whole. Do you feel whole or do you feel despair? Oh gosh, I hope I don't feel despair at that point. So really, it's like that old quote where they say, when I slide into home, I want to feel like, when I'm done with my life, I want to celebrate. I don't want to feel like I've done something, or I wish I would have done things differently. So if you've done all of these things, if you've resolved all of these, you get to the end and you'll say, I feel pretty good about myself. I feel like I'm a good person. I feel like I did some good in the world. I feel like I'm leaving a legacy of positivity. You have ego integrity. Ego means self. Integrity means wholeness. I feel whole. And if you don't, boy, it's too late. So I'm just going to talk about really what you want to try to do, I think, in the end of your life. I think by the end of your life, or even now, you want to think, when I'm at late adulthood, I want to make sure I feel ego integrity. And I want to make decisions that allow me to feel that. I don't want to get to this point and look back and go, boy, I wish I would have done that differently. So, it might seem really heavy and really dark, but I'm just saying you can start right now thinking about what can I do to make sure that I'm going to be generative when I'm in middle adulthood, that I can feel whole in late adulthood. So this is Erikson's psychosocial stages. You might need to review them. I really hope you writing down the examples, like the opposite, the midlife crisis right here, that integrity means whole. I hope you're doing that. I've been emphasizing that in my class, and I'm sure Mr. Davis has too. And then I just want to end on this, that generativity, that biggest part of your life. And it is the process of making a commitment beyond yourself to your family, to your work, to your society. And then when you think back to Maslow's hierarchy, when you think of, that self-transcendence once we get to the top, self-actualization, these are just talking about the same thing in different ways, right? So you're not there yet. You're not at the top rung. You know where you are and all those others. But I want you to think, how do I get there? And the choices that you make now will really help you get there. All right.